What would you do if one moment of weakness cost you everything? Your marriage, your reputation, and ultimately someone's life. Have you ever been tempted by something you knew was wrong? Has desire ever clouded your judgment so completely that you ignored every warning sign? Maybe you've felt that magnetic pull toward someone you shouldn't want, or perhaps you've watched a friend make choices that seemed destined for disaster. Today's story takes us to Dubai, a city where towering glass structures reach toward the heavens while dark secrets fester in the shadows below. Behind the golden facades and luxury cars, behind the charity galas and business meetings, a deadly game of passion and betrayal was about to unfold. This isn't just another tale of infidelity. This is the story of how one married executive's forbidden affair with a young hotel receptionist unleashed a chain of events so devastating, so brutal, that it would shatter multiple lives forever. We're talking about a deadly disease that spread through lies, blackmail that pushed someone to the breaking point, and a murder that rocked Dubai's elite social circles. The question isn't whether you'll be shocked by what happened. It's whether you'll recognize the warning signs that everyone missed. Because the truth is, the line between passion and destruction is thinner than most people realize. And in a city where reputation means everything, some secrets are worth killing for. If you're ready to explore the darker side of human nature, to understand how quickly desire can transform into deadly obsession, then you need to subscribe to Sinister Thoughts right now. We don't just tell stories, we expose the psychological patterns that lead ordinary people to commit extraordinary crimes. But here's what makes this case truly chilling. It didn't start with violence. It started with a simple glance across a hotel lobby, a moment of eye contact that felt harmless enough. Yet within months, that innocent attraction would leave one person dead, another facing life in prison, and families destroyed by the weight of terrible choices. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the price of forbidden desires. Meet Karim Al Nasser, 42 years old, impeccably dressed, and everything Dubai's business elite aspired to become. Executive vice president at a multinational finance firm, Karim commanded boardrooms with the same effortless confidence he displayed at charity auctions and social gatherings. His corner office on the 35th floor offered sweeping views of the Persian Gulf, a daily reminder of how far he'd climbed from his humble beginnings. Every morning, Karim's routine was precision itself. Italian leather shoes, perfectly pressed suits, and a Swiss watch that cost more than most people's annual salary. His colleagues respected him, his subordinates feared him, and his superiors trusted him with million-dollar decisions. In Dubai's cutthroat financial world, Karim had achieved what many considered impossible, genuine success without compromise. But the crown jewel of Karim's perfect life was his wife, Farida. Elegant, intelligent, and deeply committed to humanitarian causes, Farida had transformed their marriage into a showcase of modern Muslim values. She ran 3 different charities, organized fundraisers for orphan children, and somehow managed to look stunning at every social event they attended together. Local magazines featured them regularly, the power couple who balanced traditional family values with contemporary success. Their villa in Emirates Hills was a testament to their status. Marble floors imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers that sparkled like captured starlight, and a garden that required a team of landscapers to maintain. Friends and business associates would marvel at dinner parties where Farida served traditional Emirati dishes alongside international cuisine. Always the perfect hostess, always gracious. Yet beneath this carefully constructed paradise, Karim carried a weight that expensive suits couldn't hide. The pressure of maintaining perfection had become exhausting. Every smile required effort, every conversation felt rehearsed, and every day demanded the performance of a lifetime. He'd achieved everything he'd ever wanted, but satisfaction remained elusive. The finance world in Dubai moved at breakneck speed, demanding 18-hour days and weekend conferences. Karim found himself spending more time in 5-star hotels than in his own home, conducting meetings over expensive meals while Farida attended charity events alone. They'd grown apart so gradually that neither had noticed the distance until it felt insurmountable. It was during one of these endless business dinners at the Burj Al Arab that Karim first noticed the shift in his perspective. While his colleagues discussed quarterly projections and market volatility, his attention wandered to the hotel staff moving efficiently through the golden-lit lobby. There was something hypnotic about watching people live authentic lives while he performed his daily act of success. The loneliness hit him hardest during quiet moments, late nights in his office when the city lights blurred together, or early mornings when Farida slept peacefully beside him, oblivious to the emotional distance that had grown between them. He'd built the perfect life, but somewhere along the way he'd lost himself in the construction. Dubai's social expectations didn't allow for weakness or vulnerability. Men like Karim were expected to be pillars of strength, providers and protectors who never showed doubt or dissatisfaction. The city's expatriate community was particularly unforgiving. One misstep could destroy a reputation that took decades to build. Everyone watched everyone else, and appearances mattered more than truth. This pressure created a dangerous environment where men like Karim learned to compartmentalize their emotions, to smile through frustration and maintain composure regardless of internal turmoil. The city's strict moral codes meant that even the suggestion of impropriety could have devastating consequences. Yet the very restrictions designed to protect families often pushed people toward the exact behaviors they were meant to prevent. But beneath this polished exterior, cracks were already beginning to show. The perfect marriage that looked so enviable from the outside had become a performance neither partner could sustain indefinitely. The successful career that impressed everyone had transformed into a golden cage. The social status that others envied had become a burden too heavy to carry. And in the luxurious lobby of his favorite business hotel, where he conducted his most important meetings, Karim was about to encounter someone who would change everything. Her name was Zaina Hassan, and she possessed the kind of understated beauty that made people stop mid-conversation without understanding why. 26 years old, with intelligent dark eyes and a smile that could disarm the most guarded executive, Zaina worked the morning shift at the Atlantis Royal's reception desk. She'd moved to Dubai from Lebanon 3 years earlier, chasing the same dream that drew thousands of young professionals to the Emirates, a chance to build something meaningful from nothing. Unlike the flashy lifestyle bloggers and social media influencers who dominated Dubai's youth culture, Zaina carried herself with quiet dignity. She spoke 4 languages fluently, had earned a degree in international relations, and harbored ambitions that stretched far beyond answering phones and greeting hotel guests. But economic necessity had temporarily placed her behind that marble reception counter, where she handled everything from VIP requests to complex business arrangements with professional grace. The first time Karim truly noticed Zaina, she was handling a crisis with remarkable composure. A wealthy guest had lost his passport hours before an important flight, and while other staff members panicked, Zaina calmly coordinated with embassy officials, airline representatives, and hotel management to resolve the situation. Karim watched from across the lobby, impressed by her ability to remain collected under pressure. Their initial conversations were purely professional. Karim frequently hosted clients at the hotel's exclusive restaurants, and Zaina would arrange private dining rooms, ensure special dietary requirements were met, and coordinate with the sommelier for wine pairings. Her attention to detail was exceptional, and Karim began requesting her assistance specifically for his most important business meetings. But professional courtesy gradually transformed into something more personal. During quiet morning hours, when the lobby was nearly empty and Karim arrived early for breakfast meetings, they'd exchange brief pleasantries that extended longer each time. Zaina would recommend local art exhibitions she'd attended, and Karim would share insights about international markets that fascinated her business-minded curiosity. The shift from professional to personal happened so gradually that neither could identify the exact moment when boundaries began to blur. A conversation about Dubai's rapid development led to discussions about their respective backgrounds. Karim learned about Zaina's family in Beirut, her younger brother's medical school aspirations, and her own dreams of eventually starting an international consulting firm. Zaina discovered that beneath Karim's polished exterior was someone who genuinely listened, who asked thoughtful questions, and who seemed genuinely interested in her perspectives. If you've ever felt trapped by other people's expectations of who you should be, if you've ever longed for someone who sees the real you beneath the surface, then you understand the magnetic pull that drew these two people together. Hit that like button if you've ever felt suffocated by a life that looks perfect from the outside but feels empty within. Their coffee meetings began innocently enough. Kareem would arrive 30 minutes early for business appointments, and Zaina would join him during her breaks at a quiet corner table in the hotel's cafe. They discussed books, shared observations about Dubai's cultural contradictions, and found themselves laughing together in ways that felt both natural and forbidden. The danger was intoxicating. Every shared glance carried the weight of possibility and risk. Dubai's legal system showed no mercy to those who violated its moral codes. Extramarital relationships could result in imprisonment, deportation, and permanent banishment from the UAE. For Kareem, the stakes included his career, his social standing, and his family's reputation. For Zaina, the consequences could mean losing her work visa, her income, and her dreams of building a future in Dubai. Yet the very prohibition that should have stopped them seemed to intensify their connection. Their conversations grew more intimate, their meetings more frequent, and their mutual attraction more undeniable. Late evening phone calls replaced morning coffee meetings when schedules wouldn't allow face-to-face encounters. Text messages became more personal, more revealing, and more dangerous. The hotel's security cameras captured nothing inappropriate. They were both too intelligent and too aware of the risks to display affection publicly. But behind closed doors, in private dining rooms after business hours, their relationship crossed every line that Dubai's conservative society had drawn. Neither fully understood the psychological trap they'd created. The secrecy that protected them also isolated them from rational judgment. The excitement of forbidden connection clouded their ability to assess long-term consequences. They were playing with fire in a city that burned rule breakers without hesitation. What they didn't know was that their careful secrecy was about to become irrelevant. Hidden dangers were already taking root, dangers that would transform their romantic rebellion into something far more terrifying. 3 months into their secret relationship, Zaina began experiencing symptoms that defied easy explanation. It started subtly. A persistent tiredness that 8 hours of sleep couldn't cure, occasional headaches that struck without warning, and a nagging sense that something in her body wasn't functioning correctly. She dismissed these early warning signs as stress from maintaining her double life, the emotional exhaustion of keeping such a significant secret. Working at one of Dubai's most demanding luxury hotels required stamina and mental sharpness. Zaina prided herself on handling difficult guests with grace, managing complex reservation systems, and maintaining the flawless service standards that kept VIP clients returning. But lately, even simple tasks felt overwhelming. Her concentration wavered during important phone calls, and she found herself struggling to remember details that would normally be second nature. The fatigue was unlike anything she'd experienced before. During her university years, she'd pulled all-nighters studying for exams and felt energized the next day. Now, even after full nights of rest, she woke feeling depleted, as if her body was fighting an invisible battle that sapped her strength without explanation. Her morning routine, once completed efficiently, now required deliberate effort and frequent breaks. Zaina's family in Beirut noticed changes during their weekly video calls. Her mother, with that uncanny ability mothers possess to detect problems across continents, asked repeatedly if she was eating properly, getting enough sleep, or pushing herself too hard at work. Zaina deflected these concerns with reassurances about Dubai's fast-paced lifestyle and her commitment to career advancement. But privately, she was becoming increasingly worried. The headaches intensified, accompanied by muscle aches that seemed to migrate throughout her body without pattern or reason. Some days her joints felt stiff and painful, particularly in the mornings when she struggled to get out of bed. Her appetite decreased significantly, and foods she'd always enjoyed now tasted bland or actively unappetizing. The symptoms created a cruel irony. Just as her relationship with Kareem was deepening, just as she was experiencing the most intense emotional connection of her life, her physical health was deteriorating in ways that made intimacy increasingly difficult. She began making excuses to avoid their evening meetings, claiming work obligations or family commitments, when the truth was that she simply felt too unwell to maintain the energy their relationship demanded. Kareem noticed the changes but misinterpreted them. He worried that Zaina was losing interest, that the stress of their secret affair was pushing her away. When she canceled dinner plans or seemed distant during their coffee meetings, he assumed she was reconsidering their relationship. His attempts to be more attentive, to spend more time together, only added pressure to Zaina's already overwhelming situation. The hotel's demanding schedule became nearly impossible to maintain. Zaina found herself calling in sick more frequently, something that had never been necessary before. Her supervisor, initially understanding, began expressing concern about her reliability. In Dubai's competitive hospitality industry, employees who couldn't maintain consistent performance were quickly replaced by eager candidates waiting for opportunities. Night sweats began disrupting her sleep, leaving her exhausted and disoriented. She'd wake up with her bedsheets soaked in perspiration, despite her apartment's efficient air conditioning. These episodes left her feeling weak and shaky, sometimes requiring hours before she felt stable enough to function normally. The most alarming symptom was the weight loss. Despite her decreased appetite, Zaina had always maintained a healthy figure through careful eating and regular exercise. Now, clothes that had fit perfectly just months earlier hung loosely on her frame. Colleagues commented on her appearance, some expressing concern while others assumed she was following some new fitness regimen. Medical explanations raced through her mind. Perhaps the stress of maintaining her secret relationship was manifesting physically. Maybe Dubai's climate was affecting her health more than she'd realized. She considered various possibilities: vitamin deficiencies, hormonal imbalances, or autoimmune disorders that might explain her collection of symptoms. But deep down, a more terrifying possibility was beginning to take shape. The timing of her illness, the specific combination of symptoms, and the progressive nature of her decline all pointed toward something far more serious than stress or environmental factors. What Zaina didn't know was that her body was already fighting a battle she couldn't win. A battle that would soon force her to confront the true cost of her forbidden relationship with Karim. After weeks of declining health, Zaina finally scheduled an appointment with a private clinic in Dubai Healthcare City. She chose a facility known for discretion and professionalism, understanding that medical privacy was crucial for expatriate workers whose employment could be terminated for health issues. The clinic's modern facilities and international staff provided the kind of confidential care that Dubai's foreign residents required. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a British physician with 15 years of experience in Middle Eastern healthcare, conducted a thorough examination. She ordered comprehensive blood tests, including screenings for common tropical diseases, autoimmune disorders, and viral infections. The doctor's professional demeanor provided some reassurance, but Zaina couldn't shake the feeling that her symptoms pointed towards something serious. The waiting period for results felt endless. Zaina continued working, though her performance suffered noticeably. She'd become withdrawn, declining social invitations from colleagues and avoiding video calls with family members who might notice her deteriorating appearance. Even her meetings with Karim became strained, as she struggled to maintain the vibrant, confident persona that had initially attracted him. When Dr. Mitchell called requesting an urgent follow-up appointment, Zaina's worst fears began crystallizing. The physician's tone was carefully neutral, but years of living in Dubai had taught her to read between the lines of professional communications. Urgent medical consultations rarely delivered good news. The diagnosis came like a physical blow. HIV positive. The words seemed to echo in the sterile examination room, bouncing off white walls and medical equipment until they lost all meaning. Dr. Mitchell explained the technical details, viral load counts, CD4 cell measurements, and treatment protocols. But Zaina heard only fragments through the roaring in her ears. The infection appears to be relatively recent, Dr. Mitchell explained gently. Based on your symptoms and test results, we're likely looking at transmission within the past 6 months. With proper treatment, HIV is now considered a manageable chronic condition, but we need to begin antiretroviral therapy immediately. The implications crashed over Zaina like a tsunami. In Dubai's conservative society, an HIV diagnosis carried devastating social consequences beyond the medical reality. Employment termination was almost inevitable once employers learned of her condition. Her work visa would be revoked, forcing deportation back to Lebanon, where she'd face family shame and limited medical resources. But the most crushing realization was the source of her infection. Zaina's romantic history was limited, She'd had only one serious relationship before moving to Dubai, and that partner had been tested and cleared. The mathematical reality was undeniable. Kareem was the source of her HIV infection. The confrontation took place in the same private dining room where their relationship had deepened months earlier. Zaina arrived armed with medical documents, her hands trembling as she slid the test results across the mahogany table. Kareem's face drained of color as he read the laboratory findings, his usually composed demeanor cracking completely. "This is impossible," he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. I would never. "When was your last HIV test?" Zaina demanded, her voice steady despite her internal collapse. "Have you been with other women? Have you been honest with me about anything?" The questions hung in the air like accusations. Kareem's silence spoke volumes about answers he couldn't provide. His perfect marriage, his spotless reputation, his carefully constructed life. All of it was built on foundations that were crumbling beneath the weight of medical evidence. "You need to get tested immediately," Zaina continued, her lawyer's training taking over despite her emotional turmoil. "And you need to tell me the truth about your other relationships. I deserve to know how this happened." Kareem's response was a masterclass in deflection and denial. He questioned the test accuracy, suggested contamination possibilities, and implied that Zaina might have been exposed through other means. But his protestations grew weaker as the evidence mounted. The timeline was clear, the medical facts undeniable. "I have screenshots of our conversations," Zaina said quietly. "Pictures from our dinners. Hotel security footage of us together. If you don't take responsibility for this, if you don't help me figure out how to move forward, I'll have no choice but to protect myself." The threat wasn't subtle. In Dubai's rigid social hierarchy, an HIV scandal involving a prominent businessman would destroy careers and reputations instantly. Kareem's position at the finance firm, his marriage to Farida, his standing in the expatriate community. Everything he'd built could vanish within hours of public exposure. "What do you want?" Kareem asked, his voice barely audible. "I want the truth," Zaina replied, "and I want you to help me survive this. Because right now, my life is over unless someone with resources and connections helps me find a way through this nightmare." The meeting ended with neither resolution nor relief. Kareem left promising to get tested and to consider his options, while Zaina remained in the dining room, staring at medical documents that had transformed her from a hopeful young professional into a desperate woman fighting for survival. Kareem's HIV test results arrived 5 days later, confirming what both he and Zaina already knew. Positive. The medical report sat on his desk like a loaded weapon, its clinical language unable to soften the devastating reality. His carefully maintained world was collapsing, and the man who had controlled million-dollar transactions with steady hands now trembled while reading laboratory findings. The psychological impact hit him harder than the physical diagnosis. Kareem had built his identity around control, precision, and flawless execution. He was the executive who never missed deadlines, the husband who never disappointed his wife, the colleague who never showed weakness. Now, a microscopic virus had reduced him to a terrified man facing the destruction of everything he'd worked to achieve. Sleep became impossible. Kareem lay awake calculating scenarios, trying to find solutions that didn't exist. His marriage to Farida would end the moment she learned the truth. His career would evaporate when the company discovered his diagnosis. Dubai's business community would exile him permanently once rumors began circulating. The perfect life he'd constructed was disintegrating faster than he could process the implications. Meanwhile, Zaina's desperation was reaching dangerous levels. Her work performance had deteriorated beyond salvage, and hotel management had begun documenting her absences and mistakes. The antiviral medications helped stabilize her condition but couldn't reverse the damage to her professional reputation. Her supervisor had already hinted at termination, and losing her job would mean losing her visa, her income, and her future in Dubai. The second confrontation took place in Kareem's office after hours, when the building was empty and surveillance cameras couldn't capture their conversation. Zaina arrived with a manila folder containing evidence of their relationship, printed emails, photographs from their dinners, bank records showing payments to restaurants where they'd met. The documentation was comprehensive and damning. "You destroyed my life," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "The least you can do is help me rebuild it." Kareem opened the folder with shaking hands, recognizing the methodical approach of someone who understood exactly how much damage this evidence could cause. The photographs showed them laughing together, sharing intimate moments that would be impossible to explain away. The emails revealed the progression of their relationship from professional to romantic to deeply personal. "What do you want?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be impossible to provide. "I want medical treatment in London or Switzerland, somewhere with better HIV care than Dubai offers. I want compensation for the career you've destroyed. I want guarantees that when I leave Dubai, I'll have enough money to start over somewhere else." Zaina's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she spoke. "And I want you to take responsibility for what you've done." The financial demands were staggering. Private medical treatment in Europe would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Compensation for her lost career and future earnings would require even more. Kareem's salary was substantial, but not enough to cover the amounts Zaina was requesting without attracting attention from his wife or his company's financial monitoring systems. "I don't have that kind of money," he said weakly. "Then you'll find it," Zaina replied. "Because the alternative is that everyone discovers exactly how I contracted HIV. Your wife, your colleagues, the local newspapers that love scandals involving prominent businessmen. I have enough evidence to destroy you completely." The threat was clear, but Kareem's options were limited. Liquidating investments would require explanations to Farida. Borrowing money would create paper trails that auditors might discover. Taking funds from company accounts would constitute embezzlement, adding criminal charges to his already impossible situation. "You're asking me to commit financial crimes," he said desperately. "If I steal money to pay you, we'll both end up in prison." "I'm already facing deportation and social exile," Zaina shot back. "You think I care about your legal problems? You gave me a death sentence. You destroyed my future. You owe me compensation for that." The conversation escalated into accusations and counter-accusations. Kareem blamed Zaina for seducing him, for failing to insist on protection, for not disclosing previous relationships. Zaina blamed Kareem for lying about his sexual history, for taking advantage of her vulnerability, for caring more about his reputation than her life. Comment below and let us know your thoughts on moral boundaries. When someone's actions destroy another person's life, what level of responsibility do they bear for the consequences? Both were drowning in desperation, making increasingly irrational decisions under pressure that would have broken stronger people. Kareem's paranoia grew daily, as he convinced himself that colleagues were watching him suspiciously, that Farida was asking pointed questions about his health, that his world was closing in from all directions. Zaina's isolation was complete. She couldn't confide in friends without risking exposure, couldn't seek family support without bringing shame to her relatives, couldn't access proper medical care without triggering visa complications. The combination of physical illness and emotional trauma was pushing her toward increasingly desperate measures. The final meeting was scheduled for a quiet evening at a discreet location away from hotel security cameras and office surveillance. Both arrived knowing that their situation had reached a breaking point that couldn't be resolved through negotiation or compromise. Neither realized they were walking into a confrontation that would end with one of them dead. The meeting was scheduled for 9 p.m. at a small cafe in Al Karima, one of Dubai's older neighborhoods where security cameras were less common and familiar faces less likely to appear. Zaina arrived first, choosing a corner table where she could watch the entrance. Her manila folder sat beside her untouched coffee, its contents representing her only leverage in a situation that had grown increasingly desperate. Kareem arrived 20 minutes late, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled, and dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights filled with mounting panic. He'd spent the previous week trying to access funds without triggering financial alerts, but every avenue led to questions he couldn't answer without revealing his predicament. "I can't get the money," he said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from her. My accounts are monitored. My wife handles our joint investments. Any large withdrawals would require explanations I can't provide. Zaina's expression hardened. Then you'll have to find another way, because I'm not backing down. I've already lost my job. The hotel terminated my contract this morning. I have 2 weeks before my visa expires and I'm deported back to Lebanon. The news hit Karim like a physical blow. With Zaina facing deportation, her motivation for discretion was evaporating. A woman with nothing left to lose was infinitely more dangerous than someone still trying to preserve their reputation. If you expose our relationship, you'll destroy yourself too, he said desperately. Dubai's authorities will prosecute you for adultery. You'll face prison time before deportation. I'm already facing deportation, Zaina replied coldly. At least this way I'll take you down with me. Your wife deserves to know what kind of man she married. Your colleagues deserve to know what kind of person they're working with. The conversation continued for another hour, both repeating the same arguments, neither finding solutions to their impossible situation. The cafe began emptying as evening customers departed, leaving them increasingly isolated. The owner, an elderly Pakistani man, politely suggested they might want to continue their discussion elsewhere as he prepared to close. They walked outside into Dubai's humid evening air, the city's neon lights reflecting off glass towers that seemed to mock their desperate circumstances. Karim suggested they continue talking in his car, parked in a narrow alley behind the cafe where streetlights provided minimal illumination. I need more time, Karim pleaded once they were alone. Give me 2 more weeks, and I'll find a way to get at least part of the money. I'll figure out how to access funds without raising suspicions. I don't have 2 weeks, Zaina said, her voice rising with frustration. I have 14 days before I'm forced to leave Dubai forever. 14 days to salvage something from the life you destroyed. I didn't destroy your life intentionally, Karim shot back. I didn't know I was infected. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, Zaina replied. And now you're more concerned about protecting your reputation than helping me survive the consequences of your actions. The argument escalated rapidly. Months of suppressed guilt, fear, and desperation erupted into accusations and threats. Karim's carefully controlled executive persona shattered completely, revealing a man pushed beyond his psychological breaking point. His hands shook as he realized that his perfect life, his marriage, his career, everything he'd worked decades to build, was about to be destroyed by a woman who had nothing left to lose. You're going to destroy me, he whispered, the words barely audible above the distant traffic noise. You destroyed me first, Zaina replied. You infected me with a disease that will follow me for the rest of my life. You ruined my career, my future, my relationship with my family. You think I care about your problems? Something fundamental shifted in Karim's expression. The desperation in his eyes transformed into something colder, more calculating. Years of boardroom negotiations had taught him to recognize when situations became unsalvageable, when cutting losses became the only viable strategy. I can't let you destroy my family, he said quietly. Zaina didn't recognize the warning signs. She was too focused on her own survival, too consumed by her own desperation to notice the change in Karim's demeanor. She continued pressing her demands, unaware that the conversation had moved beyond negotiation into territory where rational solutions no longer existed. The physical confrontation began when Zaina reached for her phone, threatening to call his wife immediately unless he agreed to her terms. Karim grabbed her wrist, trying to prevent the call, and she struggled against his grip. The manila folder fell to the ground, its contents scattering across the alley's concrete surface. In the struggle, Karim's hand closed around a metal pipe lying beside a construction dumpster. The alley was deserted, the cafe owner having locked up and departed. No witnesses, no security cameras, no one to intervene as desperation transformed into violence. The first blow was meant to subdue, not kill. But Zaina's skull was more fragile than Karim had calculated, and the impact was more severe than he'd intended. She collapsed immediately, blood pooling beneath her head as she lay motionless on the concrete. Karim stood over her body, his mind struggling to process what he'd done. The executive who had controlled million-dollar transactions had just committed murder to protect secrets that would have destroyed him anyway. Zaina's body was discovered at 6:47 a.m. by a street cleaner making his routine rounds through Al-Karama's narrow alleys. The Pakistani immigrant worker immediately contacted Dubai police, whose response was swift and methodical. Within 30 minutes, the crime scene was cordoned off, and forensic specialists began documenting every detail of what would become one of Dubai's most shocking murder cases. Detective Inspector Ahmed Al-Rashid, a 20-year veteran of Dubai's Criminal Investigation Department, arrived to find a scene that defied simple explanation. The victim was well-dressed, suggesting she wasn't a random street crime target. Her purse remained untouched, ruling out robbery as a motive. Most intriguingly, scattered documents suggested a complex personal relationship that had somehow escalated to violence. The forensic team recovered crucial evidence from the scene. Zaina's phone contained hundreds of text messages between her and someone identified only as K in her contacts. The messages revealed an intimate relationship that had soured dramatically in recent weeks. Hotel security footage, subpoenaed from the Atlantis Royal, showed Zaina regularly meeting with a well-dressed businessman whose face was clearly visible in multiple recordings. The investigation moved quickly once authorities identified Karim through facial recognition technology. His corporate ID photo matched the man in the hotel surveillance footage, and his Range Rover was captured on traffic cameras leaving the Al-Karama area around the estimated time of death. The digital evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Dubai's expatriate business community was stunned when news of Karim's arrest spread through professional networks. Colleagues who had worked with him for years struggled to reconcile the composed executive they knew with someone capable of murder. The revelation that he'd been conducting an extramarital affair shocked friends who had admired his seemingly perfect marriage to Farida. The arrest took place at Karim's office, where he was attempting to maintain normal business operations despite the investigation closing around him. Security footage showed him arriving at work as usual, conducting meetings, and reviewing financial reports as if nothing had changed. His facade of normalcy cracked completely when Detective Al-Rashid appeared with an arrest warrant. "Karim Al-Nasser, you're under arrest for the murder of Zaina Hassan," the detective announced in front of stunned colleagues. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." The corporate headquarters erupted in chaos as employees watched their respected executive being led away in handcuffs. Phone calls to lawyers, emergency board meetings, and damage control efforts began immediately. The company's stock price dropped 15% within hours of the arrest announcement, as investors worried about the scandal's impact on business operations. Farida's world collapsed when police officers arrived at their Emirates Hills villa to inform her of her husband's arrest. The elegant woman who had graced charity galas and business dinners was forced to confront the reality that her marriage had been built on lies. The husband she'd trusted implicitly had been conducting an affair that ended in murder. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and merciless. Dubai's judicial system, combining elements of Islamic law with modern criminal procedures, showed no tolerance for adultery or violence. Karim's defense team struggled to construct arguments that could overcome the mountain of digital evidence linking him to both the affair and the murder. Text messages between Karim and Zaina revealed the progression of their relationship from professional to romantic to desperately hostile. Medical records confirmed both had contracted HIV, establishing motive for the blackmail that preceded the murder. Hotel staff testified about their regular meetings, while forensic experts explained how DNA evidence placed Karim at the crime scene. The trial lasted 6 weeks, during which Dubai's Arabic and English-language newspapers provided detailed coverage of every revelation. The case had everything that fascinated the public: forbidden romance, deadly disease, financial desperation, and ultimate violence. The verdict came on a sweltering Thursday morning in Dubai's main courthouse. Karim Al-Nasser was sentenced to life imprisonment for premeditated murder, with additional charges for adultery and public indecency. The judge's words echoed through the packed courtroom. The defendant's actions represent a complete moral failure that resulted in the tragic death of a young woman whose only crime was trusting the wrong person. Farida filed for divorce before the trial concluded, her legal team working to protect her assets and reputation from the scandal that had consumed her marriage. She withdrew from public life entirely, her charitable work abandoned as she struggled to rebuild an identity separate from the husband who had destroyed everything she believed about their relationship. The case became a cautionary tale that spread far beyond Dubai's borders. International media coverage focused on the deadly intersection of cultural expectations, forbidden desire, and the lengths people will go to protect their secrets. The story resonated with audiences worldwide because it exposed universal truths about human nature and the consequences of deception. But the most profound lesson emerged from examining how two intelligent, successful people could make such catastrophic decisions. Karim's desperate need to maintain his perfect facade prevented him from seeking help when his relationship with Zaina began spiraling toward disaster. His inability to accept responsibility for his actions transformed a manageable crisis into an irreversible tragedy. Zaina's story highlighted the vulnerability of young professionals in foreign countries, where visa requirements and social expectations create additional pressures that can turn personal crises into life-threatening situations. Her dreams of building a better future were destroyed by someone she trusted, someone who should have protected her instead of exploiting her hopes. The case demonstrated how secrets compound exponentially, creating psychological pressure that can push rational people toward irrational choices. When appearance becomes more important than truth, when reputation matters more than human life, the foundation for tragedy is already established. Remember the question I asked at the beginning: what would you do if one moment of weakness cost you everything? Karim's answer was to compound his original mistake with lies, betrayal, and ultimately murder. His story proves that protecting secrets often causes more damage than revealing them would have. If this case has taught you anything about the danger of living double lives, if it's shown you how quickly passion can transform into destruction, then subscribe to Sinister Thoughts right now and share this video with someone who needs to understand the true cost of deception. Because the line between desire and disaster is thinner than most people realize, and the consequences of crossing it are always more severe than anyone imagines.